America is the greatest country in the world. Welcome to our special Wars of the World, the Iran issue. We have great experts coming up. I'm going to keep we call this the A block at the opening. I'm going to keep this monologue short, and then I have quite a D block where we're going to spend a little more time. I want to talk about King Philip's War of 1674 and our founding grandfather's view on just war theory. But this is what I want to talk about with Iran and our recent attack, war, battle in Iran. None of this should be a surprise. First of all, we put like half of our entire military on the doorstep of Iran, so that shouldn't have been a shocker either. But even we didn't do that. All of this is spelled out in the National Defense Strategy of 2025. It was released in October of last year. It's 29 pages long. It's a quick read. And I just want to go over some of the key points here that are most relevant to what's going on in Iran right now. And again, drive home the idea that this should not be a surprise at all. They wrote it out. So here's the opening line of the whole thing. To ensure that America remains the world's strongest, richest, most powerful, and most eccentric country for decades to come. Okay, that's the goal. That's what we want to be. So what do we got to do? Our country needs a coherent, focused strategy for how we interact with the world. And to get that right, all Americans need to know what exactly it is we're trying to do and why. A strategy is a concrete, realistic plan that explains the essential connection between ends and means. Okay, so very first point. That's the opening sentence of the whole thing. This administration understands means and ends and goals and strategy. Everything this administration does has a purpose and is towards a larger goal. We've lived my adult life pretty much where our foreign policy has just been like all over the place. Whatever. And no strategy, no coherence to it at all. But in this administration, nothing is random. Nothing is outside of a concerted grand strategy. Let's go on with the document. The purpose of foreign policy, the National Security Strategy 2025 says, is the protection of core national interests. That is the sole focus of this strategy. All right, so to the people who think that war in Iran is not of our interest, this administration says everything they do will only be in our interest. They believe that ending the nuclear threat from Iran and the threat that Iran poses in the region and shipping lanes, Strait of Hormuz, Red Sea, Iran messing that stuff up is not in our best interest. Therefore, they are worthy of being taken out. So the document then explains what we want. And then there's a whole section in this is how we're going to get there. And it ends with this section about different regions of the world. And this is what I want to spend some time on right here. First, it talks about the Monroe Doctrine. Well, we see that with Venezuela. We're not going to let China come in and control Venezuela. Venezuela, we're not going to let you ship drugs into America and kill Americans. So now we're in control of Venezuela. We're never not going to be in control of Venezuela, by the way. Panama Canal and Greenland. That's all Monroe Doctrine strategy. Second point, they talk about Europe. The whole document's hilarious, actually, and you should read it about the section about Europe because it just scolds them. It's scolding Europe to get your act together. It's embarrassing for them how they've really been bragging that they have nothing to do with these Iranian strikes. And that's because they have such a high Muslim population in their countries. They are not reliable allies anymore. One day we'll be fighting a war against the caliphate of Western Europe. Then it has a section about Asia. And it says the Asian countries around China, you guys got to step up. It's a very similar message that we gave to Europe about all the NATO countries. That all you other countries need to step up. Same thing with all you other Asian countries. You all have to stand up against Chinese dominance. And then this section on the Middle East. This document says, this is so interesting. This document says that we've been too focused on the Middle East for the last 50 plus years because they've had all the oil. Well, now they don't have all the oil. We make more than them. And we have Venezuela, which is an OPEC country. And now we're buddies with Saudi Arabia, which it's taken me a long time to I still don't love it, but better than the alternative, right? So we're friends with Saudi Arabia. Iran has been, in this region, I should say, has been one of our main focuses because they've been home to so many hostile countries, but they're just not right now. And a lot of that has to do with the president's diplomacy with these Middle Eastern countries. Now, you may be thinking, well, hold on, Slater. This document says that we've been focusing on the Middle East for too long. Doesn't dropping bombs on Iran make us more focused on the Middle East? No, because the hope anyway is that once this all is over, we don't have to worry about them anymore. We can stop focusing on them, and we can put our focus over on China, where it needs to be. This document was written before Operation Epic Fury, but it was after we bombed them the first time. Here's what the document says. Conflict remains the Middle East's most troublesome dynamic, but there's today less to this problem than headlines might lead one to believe. Iran, the region's chief destabilizing force, has been greatly weakened by Israeli actions since October 7, 2023, and President Trump's June 2025 Operation Midnight Hammer, which significantly degraded Iran's nuclear program. As this administration rescinds or eases restrictive energy policies and American energy production ramps up, America's historic reason for focusing on the Middle East will recede. Instead, the region will increasingly become a source and destination of international investment and of industries well beyond oil and gas, including nuclear energy, AI, and defense technologies. We can also, how about this vision for the Middle East? We can also work with Middle East partners to advance other economic interests, from securing supply chains to bolstering opportunities to develop friendly and open markets in other parts of the world, such as Africa. The national security strategy is very clear that we will not allow Iran or any other country to get a nuke, that the Strait of Hormuz, which is right next to Iran, will always be open, and that the Red Sea must always be navigable. That's where Iran's terrorist proxies have always been causing trouble. The document says we can and must address this threat ideologically and militarily without decades of fruitless nation-building wars. We also have a clear interest in expanding the Abraham Accords to more nations in the region and to other countries in the Muslim world. But the days in which the Middle East dominated American foreign policy in both long-term planning and day-to-day execution are thankfully over. Not because the Middle East no longer matters, because it's no longer the constant irritant and potential source of imminent catastrophe that it once was. It is rather emerging as a place of partnership, friendship, and investment, a trend that should be welcomed and encouraged. Operation Epic Fury and getting rid of the Ayatollah and his leaders, and hopefully getting us closer to a free Iran, is a step towards that goal. Let's pray it works. Let's pray that the Middle East can stop being the sand in our bathing suit at the beach. Or I don't know what to know. Just stop being an annoying place and can instead be Western enough and prosperous and peaceful. Can Operation Epic Fury get us to that point? I believe it can. At the very least, let's hope it can. Let's pray it can. Whatever we've been doing these last 50 plus years, that ain't getting us anywhere. Go to the great Mike Baker. He's a former CIA officer and host of one of the top podcasts in the country, The President's Daily Brief. Mr. Baker, how do you do, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks very much, man. Good to see you.
You too. What have you found to be the most impressive aspect of Operation Epic Fury from either a military or an intel standpoint?
Well, I think you just nailed both of those things. The intelligence gathering, both from the U.S. intel community and also obviously working in partnership with our liaison, primarily the Israelis, although don't discount some of the information sharing that we have with other regional players out there. So there's the intel side of things that set the table certainly for timing of operations. And then there's just always what you kind of need to be impressed with, which is the execution by the military of an operation like this. The complexity of this is amazing. And so far, at least, some 60 hours, 65 hours, whatever we're into it at this time that we're talking, it has been an incredible display in terms of the managing all the spinning plates at the same time.
I want to talk about where it could go wrong or where it could keep going very, very right. And you can just speak generally. What's the intel operation look like to get us for us to finally know that 48 or whatever number of the top guys happen to be in the same location? Like the Ayatollah happens to be right there. Shoot the missile now, like he's there, guys. What does that look like? Is there a mole in the inside of Iran? Is it drones? Like what is that? What could that look like?
I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like layers of resources. So everything from human sources, which typically, if I had to have one thing during the course of the lead up to an operation, I would want a human source, right? Signals intercept, communications collection, the data you can get from satellite imagery, from overhead surveillance, from drones. All of that is incredibly valuable, but you know what? Nothing replaces having somebody. Now, I'm not saying that we had, well-placed sources inside that were able to say they are going to be meeting, as bizarre as that sounds at this stage, given how well aware they were of the potential for conflict. But it's a combination of all those things that you gather. And again, working in concert with our liaison partners. Iran's always been a heavy lift for the U.S. intelligence community to gather real-time, credible, verifiable information. So we've always relied on liaison partners out in that region, and again, particularly the Israelis, to assist with that. But the fact that the Iranian leadership were so careless and in deciding to have these gatherings, and it wasn't just the one where Khamenei was at, that allowed them to target. And you could tell from the timing, right? Because we've talked about that in the past, but the timing of this, launching these strikes. So essentially they were hitting targets roughly 9:45 a.m. Saturday morning, Tehran time, is not typical. And so there was that element as well that looked at the benefit of this, aside from that operational window we had, knowing when the meetings were taking place. The benefit was also this element of surprise, because the Iranian leadership likely expected any attack, should it occur, to be happening at night.
Just again, to go back on your CIA background, like what types of human sources are there?
It's a whole range. You look for anybody with access. So that could be a driver, someone who drives the defense minister around. It could be someone who, the charwoman, someone who cleans the offices. It could be a secretary. It could be a deputy foreign minister. You look for anybody who's got access to actionable intelligence, and then you look for reasons why you might be able to get them to cooperate in some fashion. And you obviously need to have access to them. So there's a lot of parts to trying to identify and then develop a human source. It's not, I know this is not the statement of the obvious, but there's a lot of work involved. And when you're talking about a denied area like Iran, same problem we have in a place like North Korea. They're hard targets.
What makes them so hard? Why is Iran so tight?
Well, part of it is just access. Do you have like if you're operating in Europe, you're operating in Africa, you're operating in Latin America, typically, you can spot and possibly develop, because you have access, the ability to actually meet or talk to or, assess an individual, right? In a place like Iran, or again, North Korea, or places like it's a denied area in a sense, right? You don't have that ability. So sometimes you have to do things somewhat remotely. That makes it more difficult. Sometimes you have to rely on a third party, again, a liaison partner who has access for whatever reason, because they're able to operate in that country. So it's I always, anytime we have a success, I'm always reminded of how difficult the recruitment process is for human sources.
Yes, I couldn't imagine. And the people who do that recruitment, it's insane. One more dumb civilian question to a CIA guy. Whether it was El Mencho in Mexico, or Maduro in Venezuela, or Ayatollah here in Iran, whoever the intel was, the guy on the ground was, let's say they know that El Mencho is going to be here, or Maduro is going to his compound tonight, or the Ayatollah and all of his guys are right there. How do they call it in to their guy? their CIA guy.
Well, you have to have, I mean, again, without going into sources and methods, you have to imagine that if you've developed human sources, and again, look, sometimes it's not possible, so sometimes you are relying on technical collection, right? People, I think sometimes by this point in time, certainly after the global war on terror, they're familiar with things like chatter, right? Well, you're intercepting communications. That sometimes is what you have to depend on, along with imagery and other technical collection means. But if you've got a human source, then theoretically, you have a way to communicate. And it may be a very remote means of communication. Again, if the environment allows for it, it's in person. But one of the first things you have to do with a source that you're developing and that you recruited is to ensure that you can maintain those communications, right? Particularly if you've recruited a source for very specific operational actions, right? So you know that you're going to have a very short window of opportunity for something, which is why you targeted that individual or those sources in the first place.
Yes. What do we need to know about the history of Iran at all from a 30,000 foot perspective, or the people of Iran or the government of Iran that is going to make this operation moving forward perhaps more difficult?
Yeah. The problem, I think, right now for the public is they watched what happened in Venezuela, right? Now, to some degree, we reshuffled the deck chairs. Delcy Rodriguez is there in charge. But we are getting cooperation. We are seeing signs, and they have released political prisoners, and they're apparently going to do more of that. And they are moving in the right direction. You can't take Venezuela and say this is a template for Iran. It's not going to happen. Venezuela's got a history of elections and democracy. There were identifiable opposition leaders who you could work with. There was an ability to map out, and hopefully it follows that map, a transition. It's not the case in Iran. I mean, it's not the case in other places as well. Cuba's a good example. There's no definable, no established opposition to say, okay, maybe you can come in behind this. The problem we've got with Iran is they've spent a lot of time thinking about what happens if we lose 3 or 4 layers of leadership. How do we continue this? The other problem is you're talking about an Iranian population that's essentially unarmed. What are they going to do? And how are they going to respond in this moment? Right? They just had thousands and thousands of their citizens slaughtered by this regime during the last round of protests. Are they going to see this moment because of the death of Khamenei and a lot of the other leaders? Are they going to see that as their opportunity now to get out on the streets, to insist on a change in government, to pressure the security apparatus into saying, okay, maybe it is time to lay down our weapons or find an alternative way of running this country? These problems can be very messy. And I don't think anybody should imagine that a transition in Iran is going to be quick or easy by any means.
That being said, do you think this was a good move by the president?
I think it was overdue. I think this move should have been done by previous presidents. And the reason I say that is because you will never have short or mid, long-term, certainly stability and peace in that region as long as the mullahs and the IRGC run Iran. It's just not going to happen because their stated objective, which they've said many times over and over and over, is the destruction of Israel, which is why they set up their proxy network, a ring around Israel. That's their goal, right? And when they chant death to America, well, they mean it. They have killed thousands and wounded thousands of U.S. soldiers over the years through the export of IED technology and resourcing proxies in Iraq and elsewhere. And we will always be kicking the can down the road, worrying about their nuclear capabilities. And that's all we've been doing. Every administration going back since the revolution has been doing nothing but putting lipstick on a pig when it comes to Iran and saying, somebody else can take care of this problem down the road. Right? And all those people out there protesting in the streets of the U.S., thank goodness there's not many of them. But look, I live in Idaho. We actually had a protest in Boise against this conflict, against this targeting of the Iranian regime. I didn't see any of those individuals out there protesting the regime of Iran, killing thousands of their own citizens, detaining tens of thousands of their own citizens. They were silent about that. So apparently they decided that, the right side of the fence is to support, the Iranian regime, which is essentially what they're doing when they go out and protest this. I get it. I get people saying, well, maybe we should have more agreement from Congress, whatever. But briefing Congress on an operation like this, can you imagine the members of the House, all of them being able to keep a secret? I can't.
Got about 30 seconds. What's something you're looking forward to in the next 48 hours, maybe a week, where you're like, oh, that's great news? Or maybe the flip side too, like, oh, darn, this is not going the direction we want it to.
Yeah, I think on the good side would be regional actors stepping in, being more forceful in their support of this effort in their own ways, right? It's not like they're going to join and suddenly be flying sorties over Iran, but a little bit more force. In a private conversation, I can almost guarantee that the Saudis, the Jordanians, UAE, all the others would say the same thing. We would be better off here in this region without the mullahs and the IRGC. But publicly, that's not tenable. They're not going to say it. So I would love to see more involvement from the regional actors in pushing this forward. Something, on the negative side would be if we see a quick succession in Iran and suddenly we've got a stable leadership. I don't think that's going to necessarily happen. The command and control has been really decimated. So, if it looks as if the IRGC and the leadership there have reestablished themselves quickly, then what that means is the Iranian people may think this, despite the damage that's been done, this is not our opportunity. And if that happens, once again, we're just kicking the can down the road.
Okay. All right. Well, watch out for both those. Mike Baker, former CIA agent or officer and host of one of the top podcasts in the entire country. Watch it, listen to it every day. The President's Daily Brief. Mike, appreciate your insight as always, brother. Thank you.